cornfields, savannas, farmland, and an underground metro system. Today's stories span far and wide, but showcase some of the most horrific and mind-boggling nightmare fuel you may have ever heard. Now let's begin. The cornfield. I'm surprised there aren't more stories about cornfields. There's this one, Gillespie Cornfield outside of Perry. Every Halloween, I go on a long ride with friends from high school to Gillespie Field. There was a path through the corn wide enough for perhaps a tractor that led to a large circle. Not quite like a crop circle, but it sure gave off that sort of vibe. It was Halloween 2010. I was 17. Lots of marine friends and hunting friends this year. Friends of friends this year. A big freaking party. We eventually had to start pulling the cars out of the circle because it was getting to be too crowded with 6 cars worth of people. It was starting to be around 2 in the morning. People were drifting out. About 20 people were left in all. Hey Anon, come get some of this beer. At age 17, you can imagine I was pretty thrilled to be allowed in the older kids' games and all that. There was this super hot chick, Tina, or Trina, I don't remember, who was all over me. Drunk as a fish in a whiskey barrel, but all over me. I was too shy to initiate anything at the time. But I did get to see her topless because she took her top off. The party dwindled down to about 10 or so people. Me, 5 hunter friends, 3 marine friends, and 2 civilians, not including myself. Let's make a freaking bonfire. 10 minutes later, there's a huge fire pit going, and we're dancing around it, pretending to be Native Americans doing a ritual, laughing and having a good time. No big deal, right? Hush washes over everyone. We all got the same rush of sudden unease and anxiety. Everybody froze, more or less in the same positions we'd been dancing in. It was goofy as crap, but nobody dared to make a sound. The only sounds were the sounds of the giant fire in the pit. Standing around for almost a minute before someone whispered, "What happened to all the crickets and crap?" There was no wind, no crickets, no birds, nothing. So we stopped dancing, thoroughly put off, and my buddy Joseph, a hunter, goes, "Guys, I'm gonna go get my rifle." Murmur of agreement, the other hunters break off to go with Joseph and grab their crap, mostly pistols and knives besides Joe. Train buddies, Kate, Samuel, and Ed, sit down on what I can roughly describe as a perimeter of sorts, around me and the other no-training folks. At this point, we're too nervous and anxious to talk. We're barely breathing. There's not a noise, just the fire pit's crackling and a slight rustle in the calm. It's starting to get a little disconcerting. We sort of stuck close together and kept wide, worried eyes on the stalks. Kate says, "Something's not right." Mutual agreement, but no one can put a finger on it. Ed sucks in a breath and everyone jumps a bit and looks over at him. If the wind is gone, what the heck is making the cornstalks rustle? I swear to God, I nearly peed myself right there. We're all about 5 seconds and a sneeze away from needing a change of clothes when Joe comes back, white as a sheet and alone. Joe's pulling the bolt back on his rifle and sprinting back to the campfire circle. He tosses his pistol to Ed. "Joe, what the heck happened? You look like you saw Sam's mom." Joe sort of glares at Ed, then hisses, "Don't you freaking joke right now. There's something in the corn." What? There's something in the corn. I'm not screwing around. Now see around there, we're used to big dogs, large crows, even the occasional oversized cat. So everyone sort of gave Joe this slanty-eyed, "The heck are you talking about?" sort of look, like he's trying to freak everyone out. We keep trying to tell him to tell us where the others are. What happened to the other 4 he went off with? Says they stayed at the cars to protect them. Rustling in the corn, Joe immediately wheels and takes a shot. Right next to my ear. "Joe, you jerk." Immediately feelings of fear and anxiety intensify. Some sort of low, whimpering noise is coming out of the corn now. Joe is gibbering like a freaking drunk, muttering incoherently. I'm about to take the rifle from him when I notice that he's got some sort of black slime smeared on his pant leg. Then once again, I nearly crap myself because what crawled out of the corn was not a dog. Not in the strictest sense, I guess. It was shambling sort of awkwardly with what looked to be a broken leg, maybe a dislocated shoulder. It looked like it had at some point in time been some sort of hound dog, a black or dark brown bloodhound. There was chicken wire wound around its neck like a noose, and it was coated in flies. There was black sludge dripping from its jowls and oozing out of a bullet hole near its right eye, which was itself drooling that same black crap like tears. Joe lost his mind at that point. Sam and I had to wrestle the rifle away from him. No more green text. It's hard for me to keep up. This crap still gives me the shakes. It kept shambling out of the corn towards us, wheezing and spitting that black crap onto the ground. The flies numerous enough that I could almost hear them buzzing from across the clearing. Joe was freaking losing his mind, collapsed on the ground, and was trying to go fetal as me and my Marine friends tried to haul him away. The dog just kept walking, and as it kept coming, it dragged something else out of the corn with it, attached to the chicken wire wound around its neck. It took me a second to piece it together in the light of the fire. But attached to the end of this morbid freaking umbilical cord was a beating heart, like a bear-sized, still bleeding, leaking heart, thumping away and leaking that black sludge crap. The flies were having a field day with it. The dog had no eyes for us. It was staring directly at the fire, like it was mesmerized or something. It dragged itself off kilter towards the fire, wheezing and spitting and sobbing, the heart beating excitedly on the chicken wire behind it. Its back legs were mangled, and it sort of dragged itself along on its front legs and one back leg. The freaking weird thing is, as it got closer to us, I swear to God, I thought I could hear some sort of words every time the dog wheezed and whimpered and cried. I didn't stick around to listen. Nobody else did. We grabbed Joe and freaking beat feet back to where the path to the cars was, making a wide berth around the dog and its cargo. Before I left, I had to watch. I'm pretty sure the others had the same feeling, because they weren't very far ahead of me when the show was over. I stopped and watched as it dragged itself, heaving and coughing, closer to the fire. The flies didn't even veer away when it stuck its head in the flames. It burned like someone had tossed a tire in there. It stunk something fierce. I just had to watch, because the dog didn't stop moving when it had been engulfed by the pit. The chicken wire kept moving, dragging the heart into the flames after the dog until they were both gone, and the only way anyone could have known it was there was the trail of black sludge on the ground and the smell of burning rubber. We were halfway home when I finally looked over at Joe. There was something that had been bothering me since the thing had gotten close enough to us for me to really hear it. I asked Joe what it had said to him, because I was almost positive that was why he was so freaking freaked out. It had been next to him in the corn, and he had heard it speaking to him. At first I thought maybe I was wrong, because he gave me this weirded out glare and he wouldn't say anything. Then he took a deep breath, and he leaned over to me. He whispered this sentence in my ear, "Come with me, I'll bring you home." And for a second I felt very cold, because that was what I had heard too. What I think I saw that night was Beelzebub. I'm not a noob, so I know that Beelzebub is not the devil, not in the actual rhetoric. He's the Lord of the Flies. I don't know why he appeared to us that night, what he wanted, or what brought him there. I don't even know if what we saw really was a demon. Maybe it was just something in the corn. There's lots of stuff in the corn nobody really wants to talk about. At any rate, I moved out of Iowa, so I don't have to worry about the corn or what I saw. I should probably try to reconnect with my friends, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'll find out that Joe died in a fire or slit his own wrists. Sometimes I have nightmares about it, and I think maybe Joe does too, which is why I'm afraid I'll find he lit himself on fire. I keep a matchbook under my pillow because sometimes I kind of want to do it, just to see what it'd be like. Story number 2. Here's one that happened to me a few months back. I want to stress that you can literally Google this incident if you want proof, although the articles I've been reading have been highly sanitized, which is part of the reason I am posting this. I am South African, going on a trip to Botswana. My sister is marrying a guy who's a game ranger, and I'm going on this trip to spend time with the dude and to get to know him. I'm supposed to be the best man at the wedding, even though we barely know each other. I arrive after a really long drive, spend the first day drinking and driving dirt bikes around, generally having a great time. The next day, Sister's fiancé suggests we go driving around the outskirts of the Okavango Delta in an attempt to see some wildlife. I agree. We go driving around and manage to spot some giraffes, leopards, hippos, and some different birds. It was really fun, but insanely hot. There were no elephants spotted. This comes up later. Eventually, we head back to the place we're staying at each night. We start to cook and drink. My sister's fiancé, let's call him John, gets a call as the sun's going down. I notice how weirded out he is by what he's being told on the phone. He hangs up, but definitely seems freaked out as we eat dinner. I ask what's up, but John just dismisses it, says it's nothing serious. After dinner, we start drinking more and more. John begins to rant about his boss. That's who was on the phone with him. Says they found some dead elephants, and he wants John to go check it out. John tells him it's too dark to see anything, but he'll go tomorrow. He apologizes to me, tells me he'll be busy working tomorrow. I say it's no problem. John, kinda drunk, feels really bad. He says we're supposed to be bonding, but now he's leaving me in a crappy little chalet with no company. The night goes on. After a few more beers, John tells me that I should come with him tomorrow. I'm reluctant. I don't like the idea of inspecting dead elephants. John insists, says they'll go by helicopter, says it'll be much better than driving in the heat. I agree to go along. The next day, we eat breakfast and head to a small airstrip. The helicopter looks rickety as heck, but I feel like complaining would be rude. There are lots of pre-flight procedures, and we end up taking off just after midday. We fly around for about an hour. We were able to search a huge amount of area really quickly. There's me, John, another ranger, and a dude who I think was a ranger in training and the pilot. John and the other ranger have tranq rifles ready in case they need to inspect a live elephant up close. Finally, we spot something. About 3 elephants lying in the sun. We land a few meters away and hop out. The stench is horrible. Flies are everywhere. The corpses are half rotten and half eaten. I think it's weird 3 elephants are dead together, but not too shocking beyond that. John and the others are discussing something. The conversation seemed pretty intense. I try to join the conversation so I don't seem like the silent oddest of the group lurking in the background. Well, I'm guessing some poachers shot him, huh? Everyone looks at me, and they all seem annoyed. I think they're mad that John invited a normie who didn't know crap along with them. Eventually, John says, "Doesn't seem like poachers. The elephants still have their tusks." I hadn't thought of that, and then I felt like a dummy. They keep inspecting the bodies, and both rangers seem really interested in one of the smaller ones. It was lying on its side, but its face was pointed at an odd angle towards the ground, like it had been trying to stick its head in the ground. Eventually, the other ranger suggests we keep looking to see if there are any others. We get back up in the air, fly around for about another hour. The ranger seems really troubled, but we see nothing. We land and they have another conversation about what to do next, while I just sit awkwardly in the helicopter with my feet hanging out. We have some lunch, and John informs me that we're going to do one more search before heading back, as we only have fuel for about another hour. We were flying back and forth, so we were only about 45 minutes from the airstrip. Before we finish eating, I overhear the ranger tell John that the smaller elephant really seemed like it had a broken neck. I blurt out, "How the heck does that happen?" The ranger just glares at me and keeps eating. We finish our food and take off again and continue to search. After about 30 minutes, the pilot tells us we're heading back and turns towards home, but after just 5 minutes, the ranger in training starts pointing and shouting. Lying on the ground near clearing of trees are about a dozen dead elephants. The sun's going down and the shadows from their corpses are easy to see stretching along the ground. We land nearby and we make our way over. The smell is even worse than last time, and the bodies are ruined. I'm not much of a nature lover, so I don't know exactly what animals can do to other animals. Even so, I could tell some bodies had been picked at by scavengers. Their stomachs were torn open and intestines spewed out everywhere. Again, all the tusks were present. I asked John if maybe someone had shot at them just for the heck of it. He says probably not. To kill this many, you need a helicopter to fire from above, And when that happens, like when they're tranked, they form a circle around the younger ones. But these bodies were all spread out over a distance of a kilometer or two, like they had been running away in a full-on panic. He then pointed out the state of some of the other bodies. A couple had feet and legs missing, which may be possible after being chewed on for a few days, but I can't imagine why some lions and hyenas would go for the legs and feet while leaving the stomach untouched. After some inspecting, we all ended up standing around the body of a smaller elephant, maybe a teenager, who was missing its head. I don't mean its skin and flesh had been picked off by birds and wild dogs. I mean its head, neck, and right shoulder were gone, like they had been pulled off. Also, while the body was smaller, it was still probably a couple tons and twice the height of a human. I actually wondered if someone had magically fed this thing a stick of dynamite or something. At this point, John and the other ranger are swearing and ranting about how screwed up all this is, but I think the rest of us all knew that they were using anger to cover up their growing confusion and worry. After I let them vent a little, I asked what we do now. The other ranger snaps at me and says we're going to go home and try to figure out how to explain this to the Department of Environmental Affairs. We all start to head back in the helicopter when the ranger in training says, "What about the hole?" We all turn and look at him, and John says, "What hole?" The ranger in training starts leading us towards a small hill while saying, "I thought you all saw it when we flew overhead." Sure enough, there in the side of this hill is a hole, dug at maybe a 15 or 20 degree angle downward. This thing is freaking massive. It looks like a mole's hill, except that it's as big as a subway tunnel. I ask John what I'm looking at, still thinking it's some sort of natural phenomena I've never heard about, but he just mumbles that he has no idea. Finally, the pilot asks if we're going in. What the heck? What did this man just say? I look at him like he's freaking crazy. Why the heck would we go in there? Luckily, the other ranger says, "Nah, it's almost dark. Let's just take some pictures and get back. We'll report this and let someone else figure it out." I'm beginning to like this dude. We start walking back. The pilot and I are taking our times checking the bodies some more, because the other three are taking pictures, and there's no hurry. Though I did feel really creeped out, I didn't say anything. Eventually, we all end up in the helicopter, except for the ranger, who has climbed up a body and is taking his last pictures. For some reason, I only noticed then how silent it was. No animals except flies, which I thought was weird considering how much raw meat was present. As the ranger jumps off the body and starts heading back, we all hear a massive grating noise. Sounded like something huge was shifting against the sand. I immediately assumed one of the elephants was still alive and was trying to stand up. We all pile out of the helicopter and make our way toward the noise. I can't see anything because the light's fading fast, and the horizon is dotted with giant elephant carcasses. I notice John and the others are making their way up some bodies, and I jump onto a nearby fairly intact corpse to get a vantage point. As I crest the elephant, never thought I'd type that sentence, I stare out at the black silhouettes lying on the ground against the afternoon sky. For a while I see nothing, but suddenly my eyes pick up movement. At first I think it's something coming out of the hole, like a freaking worm from Dune or something like that, and I tactically crap my pants. Then I notice that it seems to be an elephant trying to drag itself into the hole. John and the other ranger are already down the carcasses and heading for the hole. The rest of us follow. I'm not sure why. Maybe we just wanted to see a living elephant after all these dead ones. I won't pretend it was rational, and I can't speak for the others, but I felt like if we saw this thing up close, we might be able to get some understanding of what happened there. We all come around the side of a truly massive dead elephant and stare towards the entrance of the hole. At this point, the light was dying fast, and a lot of detail was lost in the shadow of the tunnel. But I swear to God, I saw enough to know I wasn't imagining anything. Standing at the entrance to the hole was a person, crouched over like a gorilla. The hair was long and matted, and they were completely naked, but the real problem was their size. This person was crouched over the elephant. Their body was actually slightly cramped in the subway-sized hole. The elephant's body looked like a big gray dog next to this literal giant. Its proportions were completely messed up. Its top half was stretched out and spidery with arms as long as a truck, folded so that it could fit inside the tunnel, ending in these wiry fingers with needle-like claws. Meanwhile, its bottom half was stubby and emaciated. The thing's legs were human enough in appearance, though each was the size of a fully grown man, but they were so withered compared to the rest of it that they almost seemed vestigial. We came to see it just as it was getting back into the tunnel. What had seemed like an elephant crawling into the hole had actually been an elephant body being dragged by the leg into the earth. We all stood in abject horror as this thing pulled at the elephant's corpse like a sack of potatoes. We hadn't made a sound, but at some point it turned its head around. Not like it heard something, but rather like it was a wild animal checking its surroundings from time to time. Its eyes immediately snapped towards us. The thing's face was so messed up. The eyes were white and milky, but I could still tell that it saw us. The nose was upturned like a bat, and its mouth hung slightly open as it breathed, revealing massive slab-like teeth, like something you'd see in a hippo's mouth. They were all crooked, and some protruded out at odd angles, but they all looked as hard as steel. I could immediately imagine them tearing through the legs and heads of the bodies we had seen so far. The strangest part was the shape of its head. It seemed disfigured and bulbous, like a fetus's skull. It also bent in on one side more than the other. The best way I can describe it is like the lady from the painting on it, except wider and obviously far larger. The skin was veiny, and although its shoulders and back were covered in dirt, it was as white as a sheet, almost to the point of being translucent. The skin around its eyes had enough wrinkles to almost act like eyebrows, which gave it a very surprised, slightly confused look. After a split second of confusion, this thing's face contorts into a look of absolute rage. It lets out this awful freaking roar. Sounds almost like the scream of a deaf person, sort of low and monotone, but it's loud enough that my hands instinctively slam into my ears to try to block out the sound. We all start sprinting towards the helicopter, John shouting something, but my ears are ringing, and it's too muffled to make out. We all climb into the helicopter in complete terror. I strap myself in and look back toward the hole. The giant freaking monster is clawing its way towards us. It's clearly moving as fast as it can, but it's still pretty slow. Its back legs are dragging along limply, and it's only moving by clawing at the ground and elephant corpses. It moves like someone who's paralyzed from the waist down. We all just sit there petrified and stare at it, while the pilot starts the helicopter. I remember watching it grab at one of the larger elephants to try to use it as an anchor to pull itself along. The elephant corpse literally slid towards it, like a freaking elephant corpse wasn't heavy enough to use as a weight. The helicopter starts to lift off, and the thing reaches out for us. It's still a long way off, but it came a heck of a lot closer than I would have thought possible. Its whole body is probably longer than 2 school buses, placed end to end. The ranger fires his train gun at it, but I honestly didn't even see if it hit or not, although I'd be amazed if he missed that thing. We don't stay around. The pilot turns the helicopter towards home, and we shoot back faster than I thought possible. I think I heard another dull roar as we flew away, but my ears were still ringing, too much to be certain. The rest of the night was a blur. I don't remember much of the conversations after we landed, but I wasn't content with being back at the chalet. I just felt like that thing was still crawling towards us in the night and would eventually smash through the little wooden chalet I was in. I told John I was leaving right away and drove for about 6 hours before pulling into a petrol station and falling asleep in my car. When I woke up the next morning, I kept driving until I got home. I got in the shower and just stood there thinking for a while about everything that happened. Apparently, they had got a massive group together to go search the area, but when they arrived, they only found 8 bodies, and the hole had partially collapsed. Over the next few weeks, John told me about the attempts to track down whatever that thing was, but eventually they gave up, and some of the other rangers started to think I'm with them. Apparently, he had quite a few arguments over what happened that night. Elephant corpses keep showing up near those holes, but no one's willing to go walking into them to see what's inside. After another week or two, John quit that job, and now he's working as a delivery man. You're probably wondering why you haven't heard about this. Well, you can find some stories about it, but most of them attribute the deaths to some kind of pandemic that spread through the population. You'll also notice that they omit most of the pictures. They'll only show you pictures of the more intact elephants, so that you don't wonder how much massive creatures can get pulled limb from limb, and they'll never show you the holes dug in and out of the ground. Story number 3, the heritage. My granddad told me stories once. Something terrified my mother's side for darn near 2 generations. Never hurt anyone, just really loved scaring the crap out of people and livestock. They lived at, well, what's now my granddad's. My granddad at the time was a young man. He was riding through the woods on little more than a horse and a buggy at night with my Uncle M. Comfy lantern, all that, just rolling along. They hear something moving behind the wagon. My uncle stops the wagon, and that something back there stops too. They look back. Whatever it is, it's outside the light. They don't see any eyes. They start moving again, and it starts moving too. They stop again, and it stops. They cock their shotguns, they start moving again, and it begins grinding and snapping its teeth back there. They hurry the horse back into the yard, and whatever it is stops at the tree line. This ties in a little later with one interesting detail, so bear with me. After that night, the animals start acting strange. They're out grazing during the day, free to roam. By 3 p.m., they all as a group come back to near the house despite it not being feeding time, every day for months. They seem nervous. They don't lose weight, though. They don't become unhealthy despite the stress. They just leave the woods at a certain time every day for no reason at all. It seemed everything cleared out of the woods. Livestock, deer, coyotes, foxes, rabbits, everything scrammed. Deer and prey fleeing together. The family being country-strong rednecks didn't give a dang. After months of this, Granddad, his cousins, and uncle go out coon hunting. Got the dogs with them, pretty big mutt breeds, some kind of hounds. They're hunting for hours and don't find anything, dogs barking and sniffing around. Then suddenly, the dogs stop and go full alert. The armed men stop and do the same, and the dogs suddenly just bolt. The men, deciding they're not going to one day be depicted as horror film characters, do the same. Then they hear it behind them. Sounds like it's on 2 feet. It's not galloping, but running. They make it back to the house and run inside. "Ma, there's some weird crap going on out there." Silence. Everybody standing in the living room, tense. Something slams onto the front deck, sounded like it jumped off the roof. Then there's a loud scratch down the sidewall of the house, from side to side, like someone ran a knife down the boards, which are lapped over each other and not smooth. Everybody was WTFing. The animals in the barn began to go crazy. Now that the family's livelihood was threatened, everyone's strapped up and goes outside and begins to creep up to the barn. The mules were so freaked out they break out of their stalls and kick the door down. They flee into the woods. They can hear something moving around in the rafters. Whatever it was, it had the high ground. Everybody aimed and waited. They hear a thud a good 20 feet away, and then nothing. They go back inside, but don't really sleep. Daylight comes and they gather the scattered animals and investigate. They find a footprint. In my granddad's words, it was hovered like a cow, but with claws like an eagle. There ain't no animal like it. It had 3 talons, too. Now it never actually hurt anyone. Nothing happened after that night until years later. My mother was a preteen. Poor family, shared a bedroom with brother upstairs. They had a bed next to the open window because they didn't have AC and it was summertime. They were sleeping one night. Something leans in through the window and breathes in their faces. Everybody screamed and ran downstairs like their lives depended on it. My grandmother, 5 minutes before this, was dreaming. A figure I don't recall her describing said, "Wake up, it's about to happen." She wakes up, grabs and holds the screaming kids when they make it to her. There was other little stuff around that time. The porch swing would swing when there was no wind and nobody had touched it. You might hear your name being called, but no one called you. Little things. Later on, that house got struck by lightning and burned down. They rebuilt to his current house. and that was the last of it. But then maybe it was just a tweak to the timeline to ensure something. Maybe those stories somehow came up in a conversation on a date between my parents. Maybe that terror strengthened my people's faith. Maybe. Or maybe it was just for me and what I came to know. Back when I was 17, I lived just outside of Washington, D.C. I enjoyed it well enough, for the most part. D.C. has no funds and has a massive homeless problem, but it isn't a complete crapple. I was an artist in school, with depression and crap. I got kicked out of my nice Catholic prep school due to crap grades. Instead of sending me to public school over in Virginia, where I lived, my parents decided to send me to a non-traditional school in the city. In addition to school, I had a job at a crappy movie theater in Rockville, which is just outside D.C. to the northwest. Now I was 17 at the time, but had no driver's license. When I was able to get my learner's permit at 15, I procrastinated due to not wanting to go to the DMV for a whole year. When I finally did get my permit, I did my hours and my driving course and such, but fell into the same trap of not wanting to go to the DMV. So I didn't get my license until I was almost 18. So because of this, and because my parents rightfully didn't want to drive me into DC every day during rush hour, only to then have to go back into Virginia to get to work, I took the metro to school and work every day. If there are any Washingtonians here, then you might understand my route. I started out on the Virginia side of the Potomac River, to the east of the city at Virginia Square GMU station. My school was about a block away from the Eastern Market Metro station, about 3/4 of a mile southeast from the Capitol along Pennsylvania Avenue. My job was a little ways away from the Rockville Metro station. When my shift ended at around 11:15, I had to book it to the metro stop most days. Station's close at 12 Sunday through Thursday, and I would take the line down to Metro Center, which, as the name suggests, is in the central DC area. Then I'd switch to the Orange Line, take the line to East Falls Church in Virginia, from which I would take the bus or a cab home. Sorry for the setup. It is important. So now that all that is established, I can start getting into the story. For a couple months, everything was completely unremarkable. I had ridden the metro on and off for most of my life, but never this extensively, so I was fine with the whole experience. The only part that ever felt weird to me was coming home at night. During the weekends, even at like 1 a.m., people were on the metro, but during the week when I came home from work, it was very common for me to be the only person on the train, and sometimes even the only person in an entire station, though I wasn't really spooked by it, at least for a while. I always sat up at the front in the train. I liked the front. I liked looking out at the front of the train and watching the tracks go by. I'd loved doing this as a kid, and I still did because I was a child even at 17. One night, I was riding the red line back from Rockville to Metro Center. I was the only person in the car, probably in the train. I caught the last train before the system closed. I was looking out the front of the train like usual when I saw something weird. It looked like a white branch, like a birch or something. It was thin, almost spindly. It was pressed up against the wall when I first saw it, as the train's headlights started to hit it. I thought it must have been a length of wire or pipe. But then, it moved. It was really quick. Not even like twitchy quick. It just suddenly moved out of the edge of the headlights of the train, and I couldn't see it anymore. I wrote it off in my head as being overworked, as cliché as that is. After all, tending to a popcorn machine on a pretty much empty movie theater is hard work. I pretty much forgot about the incident over the course of the week, due to school and such occupying my mind. And then, about a week later, I saw it again, and about the same place on the line. This time, it was on the opposite end of the tunnel, and I got to see a little more of the thing before it moved away. It was connected to something bigger, like a leg connected to a body, which is what I immediately conjured up in my mind. As the train's headlights hit it, it moved away with the same agility. But this time, about 10 seconds later, I saw it again, and it did the same thing. And then a few days later, it happened again. This time, all I saw was what looked to be a foot, before whatever it was scampered off into the darkness. At this point, I was freaking out. I felt that terrible deep-seated desire to know more starting to grow. I started to be vigilant for the weird leg anytime I was on my way home from work. I would see it more and more often over time. Sometimes I would see a little more than leg. Sometimes I would even see two of the legs, but it would always scamper into the darkness as soon as the light from the train hit it. Sometimes I would see it a few times during one ride, sometimes not. I started trying to record whatever it was. I would take a notepad with me and record between which stops I would see it, how much of it I saw, and if I saw it repeatedly. At one point, it occurred to me to ask the train operator if he saw anything. So one night, after I got off at East Falls Church, I quickly asked the operator up front if he ever saw anything weird when he drove the trains at night. I tried not to be a spurg about it, but he seemed on edge when I asked him, even though he replied with a simple, nah. Things continued like this for a while, and seeing the thing almost became part of my routine of getting home. I wasn't scared of it anymore. Not really, since I was in a fast-moving metal missile and the thing never seemed to be hostile or anything. Things just continued to go about the same path, until one night, crap got real. I was riding on the train again, and I was waiting for the leg to show up, but it didn't. I had seen it every day for the past 2 weeks, but there was nothing tonight. I was thinking to myself, something along the lines of being sad that the 2-week streak was coming to a close, when I saw them. 2 glints in the darkness. My eyes at this point had gotten so used to spotting things in the dark, due to months of spotting this thing in addition to years of playing Twitch shooters. So I saw them there, and I knew they weren't normal, but I still tried to rationalize it, even after months of spotting a leg in the metro tunnels. But then they blinked. It was unmistakable that it was a blink that had occurred. I jumped so hard I nearly pulled a muscle in my leg. I could tell that those eyes I saw were entirely black. Black and beady, like the eyes of a rat. Suddenly my fear for the thing in the dark was renewed. I was on edge for the rest of the ride to Metro Center. Though I still felt safe enough inside the train, I was realizing the gravity of the situation. There was something in the dark of the tunnels of the metro, and it had taken enough of an interest in me to show up almost daily. That thought followed me to Metro Center. Ironically, I felt safer in the station than I did on the train, due to the simple fact I had never seen anything weird in the stations. I got to Metro Center, got off the train, and waited for the next one. It was then that I started hearing it, a soft pitter, patter, not unlike that of a rodent scurrying across a floor. I became on edge again. The noise started getting louder, and I started to crap myself more. There came a point when it actually began to sound like human footsteps. I said screw it to myself, and turned around toward the tunnel where my train had come from. I shouldn't have. It was there, not just a leg or eyes, the thing in its entirety. And it wasn't in the tunnel anymore. It was on the platform with me. That thing is something I will never forget. It was like a person, but warped to the point where almost all traces of humanity were gone. It was thin, horribly thin, emaciated. I could see how its pallid, gray flesh wrapped around its bones, not even covering the holes in some of its leg and arm bones. It was hunched over, not on all fours, but hunched over like an elderly person, with its legs crumpled down and its arms held in front of its chest, like how a prairie dog holds its arms when it stands up. Its head was completely hairless and was hung down so I couldn't make out its face. I opened my mouth to scream, but I just whimpered like a baby. I shouldn't have done that. I think I provoked it. It began to move towards me with a horrible gait. It stayed in its hunched-over position, low to the ground, but its legs extended out, and it took long strides forward, like crouch walking. Its legs wobbled and twitched with each step towards me. It was obvious this thing wasn't used to walking like this, that it was better suited to crawling along the walls. As it came closer, I started to smell it. It had that pungent, rancid odor of trash in the city. My eyes began to water as it got closer, speaking of which, it was closing the gap fast. When I first turned around, there must have been about 150 feet between us, but within 5 or 6 steps, it was only about half that distance away. My stupid brain finally kicked in, putting me into survival mode, and I freaking booked it across the platform. My stupid idea was to try and outrun it to the end of the platform, then jump across the tracks to the other platform and keep running out towards the surface. My plan got about 1/4 done when I realized it wasn't going to work, because that's when the thing stretched out. I looked over my shoulder and crapped myself again. The thing was now standing on its legs, and it had its arms out. I don't know how I managed to only see as much as I did in the tunnel, but what I saw in there wasn't accurately representing the whole thing. It must have been 15 feet tall at least. Its torso was thinner than its femur. Its arms came down to its shins as it let them drag along, and then there was its face. Its face looked like that of a starving man, with sallow skin tightly wrapping its cheekbones like a corset. Its eye sockets were far too big for its beady little eyes, with the top of the socket jutting out a good 2 inches beyond where the eye ended, and the mouth was a gaping hole with no jaw to be seen. This thing had reached its full height, and I had just about made peace with my death when some beautiful mofo honked the horn on his train that was coming in downstairs to signify to no one that no one could get on. I don't know why, but that horn caused the monstrosity in front of me to reel backwards and let out the most horrible sound I've ever heard before, going on all fours and scuttling back into the tunnel. I took a cab home that night, and then pretty much every night for the rest of the year. I haven't gone on the metro there since. I've moved farther into Virginia, so I haven't been around Washington. But even if I was back there, I wouldn't take the metro again, if it meant losing $1 billion or whatever. I did some more research. Apparently there are urban myths of something in the tunnels down there. I also found out about a series of abandoned tunnels just under DuPont Circle, the metro stop nearest to which I commonly saw the thing. And that's pretty much it. This brings us to the end of today's episode. If you enjoyed these stories, then hit the like button, leave a comment, press the notification bell, and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in our next story.